It's looking more and more likely that the US was responsible for striking an Iranian girls' school last week. And now, even the most adamant Trump supporters are demanding answers. This from Laura Ingraham. If true, this is horrific news, and the US military will have to address this publicly. Proximity of military compound obviously a factor, but our weapons also have pinpoint accuracy. She's linking the Wall Street Journal report on that there. Jank, MAGA is starting to turn on Trump again, it seems. What are your 2 cents here?
Yeah, so I think that there's 2 reasons why Laura Ingraham had this tweet. One is there is a genuine pro-life movement now saying, I'm pretty sure we were in favor of keeping kids alive. And we had asked for that a long time ago, and I'm a little shocked that it's arrived. So it's not just because of that there's morality around this issue, and we're gonna talk about the Israelification of our military and how to avoid it, but there's a second reason too. And the second reason is political, and it's actually pretty smart by Laura Ingraham. So I'll explain that in a minute.
Let's get into the details. On February 28th, the strike on an elementary school is the deadliest known episode of civilian casualties since the war began a week ago. While the total death toll has yet to be confirmed, Iranian health officials and state media say it has killed at least 175 people, many of them children. Since the attack, US and Israeli officials have neither confirmed nor denied responsibility. And we touched briefly on reporting that toyed with the idea that the US being responsible yesterday. But according to an exclusive Reuters report, US military investigators believe it is likely the US forces were responsible for an apparent strike on an Iranian girls' school that killed scores of children on Saturday, but have not yet reached a final conclusion or completed their investigation, 2 US officials told Reuters. The officials did not rule out the possibility of new evidence emerging to rule out the US. CNN also took a look at satellite imagery of the area, and again, it suggests the US was responsible.
It seems more and more likely that the US was responsible. A new satellite image shows an Iranian Revolutionary Guards base and an elementary school in southern Iran. Here you see craters in several of the buildings, including the school. They were hit in their exact centers, suggesting precision strikes, experts say. A wall separates the school and the base. Satellite images from December show dozens of people in what appears to be a handball court at the school. Reuters now reports that US military investigators believe US forces were responsible, though they haven't yet reached a final conclusion.
It paints a picture of multiple simultaneous or near simultaneous strikes. And it looks like these were delivered with explosive munitions, probably air delivered. I think the most likely scenario in this case is that it's a US or Israeli airstrike gone awry. It's probably a targeting failure somewhere in the targeting cycle, an intelligence failure.
The Israeli military say they weren't operating in the area.
To date, we've hit over 2,000 targets.
American military officials say they carried out extensive strikes in this area. They've released this map, which shows strikes in southern Iran. The base and the school in Minab are located here.
Many claim the school was located on an Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps base. However, an analysis by Al Jazeera's Digital Investigations Unit of satellite imagery compiled over more than a decade, as well as recent video clips, published news reports, and statements from official Iranian sources, has revealed that the school has been clearly separate from an adjacent military site for at least 10 years. If the US role were to be confirmed, the strike would rank among the worst cases of civilian casualties in decades of US conflicts in the Middle East. Deliberately attacking a school or hospital or any other civilian structure would likely be a war crime under international and humanitarian law. Reuters stated it's unclear how much longer the investigation would last and what other evidence investigators are looking for. CNN stated there's currently an internet blackout in Iran, making it difficult to examine the weaponry fragments left behind. According to Al Jazeera, 4 schools have been hit in Iran since the war started, with the 4th being another elementary school in Tehran today. The circumstances and number of casualties on the other 3 strikes remain unclear. There's more, but for the sake of time, Keith, I want to bring you in here. What do you make of this?
Well, this is what happens when you bring in a Fox News host to run these operations who reportedly has an issue with alcohol. We don't know whether or not that's still going on. And I want to say that I wish MAGA would turn on Trump over this, but we know that MAGA will eat whatever slop they're given by Donald Trump, unfortunately. 83% of Republicans support this war, even though MAGA wanted no new wars, Donald Trump said he was going to release the Epstein files. He's not doing that. Donald Trump said he wasn't going to ever put us into any sort of conflict that we didn't need to be in, and MAGA is 100% behind it. So I don't see how Donald Trump loses support from his base over this. And when it comes to this awful incident with school children, I just want to say that I don't know if we can even trust the investigators who are going to be tasked to look into this, because I don't trust anything coming out of the government right now. And maybe I never should have, but certainly I don't now when Donald Trump is meddling in every single investigation to make himself look as good as possible. We don't even know if the jobs reports are accurate anymore. So are we gonna trust them to investigate whether or not they created one of the mass casualties, one of the worst in a generation?
Yeah, well, I'm surprised that they already took some responsibility. I didn't expect that at all. So maybe it was in an effort to say, remember, it wasn't Israel. You should blame America. So I don't know, but I assume they didn't falsely take responsibility, to be fair. But okay, now let's break it down a little bit. So the reason why I mentioned that is obviously America and Israel are both doing bombings and is a joint operation. And I often talk about the Israelification of our foreign policy and our military. And who hits schools and hospitals? The Israelis, nonstop. They hit almost every hospital, almost every school in Gaza. So remember when they had that first hit on a hospital and we weren't sure if it was the Israelis or an errant missile, and they went ballistic over, you're all anti-Semites, how could you say the Israelis would have hit a hospital? And then they hit every hospital in Gaza. And they're notorious for double taps. And so here, they say there's a double tap. The reporting on it is not as clear to me, right? But like, if it's a double tap too on top, that's why part of it is some people on the right. Laura Ingraham is not Laura Ingraham. That's a hilarious thing to say. She is basically speaking for her audience because she's getting pressure from her audience, right? And she says something that's a little bit different on Fox News, a little bit different on X. And on X, there's a lot of people, and this goes to the point that Keith brought up about MAGA and stuff. No, there are different bubbles. Like on television, Trump supporters are still 100% with Trump because Fox News is like, Trump is a demigod, he's done nothing wrong. Remember, he told you he was gonna attack all these countries. They're like, did he? Yeah, I guess he did, yeah, I love it, right? So, but online, with under 55-year-olds, it's a totally different situation. So if on X, for example, Laura Ingraham said, oh yeah, it's great, we should do double taps and murder all these kids. People would be like, no, even the right wingers online on X would be like, at least some portion of them would be like, no, we shouldn't do that, right? That's crazy. So there's that. But the second thing that I think is more important politically is that she's basically screaming like in the movie, get out, get out. She's taking pictures, like take pictures, have the flash go off so he wakes up and gets out. Because she's basically saying, don't keep going. If you put in the ground troops, you won't just destroy yourself, you'll destroy the Republican Party. Because even the guys on TV, as zombies as they are watching Fox News, if he puts ground troops in, that base is going to crumble. And already he's lost almost all the independents. So they're in a world of hurt here politically. And then lastly, we usually have very precise intelligence. I mean, look at how clear we were on the other 3 buildings and this building, right? We knew exactly where to hit them. Remember, we killed the top 49 Iranian leaders because we had excellent intelligence. So this is the one time we had bad intelligence? Maybe, I'm hoping yes. I'm hoping it was a mistake, because if they did this on purpose, that's as un-American as it gets. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.